it's a pretty small budget when you're getting started, and you have to figure out how to split that up. So there's a number of ways of prioritizing that, and a lot of people tend to spend the money in like the worst places.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedictine, and I'm here with my co-host, Malcolm Owen-Flood. How are you today, my friend?
I'm great, man. Back in Canada after a week in Switzerland, or I guess 2 weeks in Switzerland. But yeah, it's even colder in Canada. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Been a little sick, but feeling better again. Hope my voice lasts. I've actually played a show with my band for the first time in 2 or 3 years. I don't know, the weekend. So
That's
it was great.
Awesome. Right
on. So you were in Switzerland because of your documentary?
Yeah, we were recording some guests over there in Switzerland. We actually flew out Manu Katché, who is like Peter Gabriel's drummer, drummed for Sting and stuff, and got to do an interview with him, and I got to record him playing, which was just like bucket list stuff for me, right? It's amazing. He was so good. It was just insane. And he played like the sledgehammer groove. It was sick.
Oh wow, that's sick.
Yeah.
Like when will
Great
this documentary be finished? Actually, because you've been working on that for quite a while, and I've been intrigued to watch the result of that.
I can't wait as well. Like I still haven't seen anything other than like what I see on set, but I haven't seen any like stuff after post. It's probably at least a year out still from the first season coming out.
Wow.
And then, but we're already starting to film season 2 as well. So that'll be even longer after that.
Okay, so it will be an episodic thing? I thought it was a kind of one movie type of thing.
That's what I initially thought too, but no, it's actually going to be like a docu-series, I guess is what it's called.
Okay.
So it's 6 episodes, I think, in a season, and there'll be 2 seasons at least so far. Yeah, it just keeps growing.
Awesome. Like, if you don't know what we're talking about here, it's what is it called? Give Me the Beat?
Yeah,
I think?
yeah. The documentary is called, or docu-series, I guess I have to start calling it, is called Give Me the Beat. And we pretty much are just documenting the history and like evolution of rhythm and how it relates to everyday life and the world. And pretty much I just get to record a lot of drummers all over the place. It's pretty great.
Yeah, awesome. And all over the world, right? Like you've been to the Caribbean, Switzerland, wherever, like
Yeah. I'm in Peru in a couple weeks.
Wow.
It just keeps going. Yeah, I've got to get in shape, man. I'm pretty worried about Peru. We're doing Machu Picchu and stuff. And I'm like, oh God, I need to exercise.
Yeah, it's the heat especially. Like it's like everything's more exhausting up there.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, the altitude's just outrageous, but it'll be great. Cool. I'm excited.
Cool. Is there already a link or something that we could post that people know what we're talking about, or is it like too far?
There's not much available yet, but for people that do want to check it out, if you just like, I would follow our Instagram page. Just Give Me the Beat on Instagram. You'll find it, and it's probably the best way to follow along with what we're doing. There's a social media person who's just killing it and getting photos up from all the trips and stuff, and sometimes we're posting videos of the performances as we're recording them and stuff.
Oh, that's sick. So yeah, awesome. I'll post that in the show notes, and then eventually will be a series.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get into today's topic. We're going to talk about what's the best use for your limited budget as a recording band. We have a couple of points here that we want to talk about. What do you think we should start with? What's the best or the most important thing that people should consider spending money on?
So if we're talking about like how to spend your little or however sized budget, but most cases starting out, it's a pretty small, but it's a pretty small budget when you're getting started, and you have to figure out how to split that up. So there's a number of ways of prioritizing that, and a lot of people tend to spend the money in like the worst places. So I think this is a good thing we're talking about it. But I do think we still have to start with gear because you can't really, like, unless you can apply the stuff you're learning and actually record, you're not really learning or getting anywhere with it. So I think the basics, and I do mean like the very basics of gear, is where we need to start the conversation.
All right. Yeah, I totally agree because otherwise you cannot apply anything you learn. But I still think it's true what you said that you have to have some gear to get started, but it's probably not as much as you would think, and it's not as important as you would think. So it's important that you have gear, but which exact gear is maybe not as important as people might think. And I think I'll start with the absolute basic thing you need is some sort of recorder, like either a hardware recorder thing or a DAW, just DAW, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation, and it's a program on your computer that can record audio. So you need some sort of recording medium, and these days it's probably the computer with a DAW. And you need an interface, and the interface is basically what we call an interface. Is basically a thing that consists of several things that go together. There's inputs, there's outputs, there's a converter that converts signals from analog to digital and vice versa. And there's the actual interface, which connects the device to your computer. And usually those are like all-in-one boxes for this application here, for for the basic ones at least. And you would need one of these. All it basically needs to have is one or two microphone inputs. Ideally, it would have a DI input where you can plug your guitar or bass into it directly. It should have some outputs where you can plug your monitors in or your headphones. And it should have some interface, so like the actual interface, like the connection, like a USB or Thunderbolt. Like there's probably not much FireWire interfaces out there these days. You don't use them. Probably you don't want to buy one of those probably unless you have a very old computer. But USB or Thunderbolt is usually the two options you have. And you can get a decent one of these, like for, I don't know what they are in dollars, but here in Europe, it's like 120 euro or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, to get a very basic but solid interface with all those features that you just said. So, DI ports, headphone jack, monitor outs, everything you need, really. Good solid USB interface is like, I think 150 Canadian dollars. So that probably lines up pretty much with what you just said. So very affordable in the scheme of things, and it'll get you pretty far. I don't even want to say how long I went with like the cheapest interface ever while I was running my business recording bands professionally.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still, like, you can't see that, guys, but I can show it to Malcolm. I'm recording this podcast right now with this thing here. It's a 2-channel, like by Steinberg, the company that makes Cubase, the DAW. It's a little interface with 2 channels. USB. It's $120, I think, and I use it for mobile recordings and for this podcast, and it's super awesome. I still use it. And yeah, you can get one of these. There's similar ones out there. Focusrite makes a decent one that many people use.
That's the one I had.
Yeah. So yeah, probably start with that. And if you don't know what, like when we talk about an interface, what that actually is, I think I explained it, but you can think of it as it replaces the internal sound card of your computer, basically. Like every computer has a sound card in there, usually with a headphone output and maybe a microphone input. And like the interface is just that, but an external device. And it kind of replaces your sound card because it just has better audio quality and more inputs and outputs. But it's basically a sound card. And you just change the settings on your computer from the internal sound card to this device, and then you're set, basically.
I think we should just briefly touch that what we're describing is a basic 2-channel interface. And that's going to be like the number one suggestion for people just getting into this and starting out. But if you're looking at recording live drums, it's a little bit of a different conversation because you'll probably need more than just 2 channels. So you'd have to look at a bigger interface. But keep in mind that if you're recording live drums, it's more than just having a big interface and because that also means more mics, it means more cables, it means better monitoring solutions as well. And it also means having much more knowledge in how to record, because recording drums is a whole beast in itself. If you've listened to our drum phase episode, we kind of scratched the surface on that, I think. You can definitely go a step further and get a larger interface that'll let you have more channels to record drums, but that entails a lot more as well. But carrying on from the interface, I think the next step would probably, for me anyways, if I was prioritizing, would be a decent set of headphones, closed headphones, just something to monitor. I would probably put that ahead of actual like loudspeaker monitors. Would you agree with that, Benedict?
Yes, I would. Absolutely. Because chances are that your rehearsal room or wherever you record is not like acoustically ideal. And you should still have a pair of speakers, I think, just to see how it sounds in the real world and like through air, basically. But the best way to deal with the situation in like any room is a decent pair of headphones. It's much cheaper than great acoustic treatment and great monitors. And once you have to get used to judging things on headphones. But once you did that, it's a very affordable way to hear like things in a reliable way and just eliminate room problems, especially low end stuff. And yeah, just get a decent pair of headphones. You will need it anyways because you probably don't have, or many of you will probably not have a separated like control room. So you need something where you can listen to stuff while it's recorded next to you in the room. So, or you might need it for monitoring purposes. So headphones is a must anyway. And
yeah, if you're singing or something, you don't want the loudspeakers blaring the song or a metronome into your microphone. So headphones are the only way to get around that.
Yes, and although they are usually not as linear, not as flat with the frequency response, I would recommend closed headphones, like if you had to choose, because if you're in the same room with the loud noises and if you want to prevent stuff from the headphones going into the microphone, I would get a decent pair of closed headphones. There are comfortable ones out there these days. It doesn't have to be like those, like some heavy, clunky phones that you don't want to wear. There are good ones out there and comfortable ones. Closed meaning closed back, like there are open back and closed back. Just research that, you'll find out easily what it is. But there's those two options, and yeah.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's not common knowledge, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's headphones that have open back. They're not isolated so as much. So if somebody's sitting next to you, they will probably hear what you're listening to.
They will definitely hear it.
Yeah, exactly. So I would recommend getting a decent pair of closed headphones. Yeah. One thing I would just wanted to add to the interface thing real quick, but just a little thing here. Before we forget, you could also start with a small one, but buy one that you can actually expand later. That's also an option. You don't have to go with small or big necessarily. There are some, like in the, I don't know, I think it starts with the 4-channel ones or so. They don't have enough inputs to record the drum set with many mics, but they often have something called an ADAT interface or something like that. And you can, like, it's a digital optical interface built in. And when you decide that you need more inputs later, you can buy another device, like additional microphone preamps with a digital analog digital converter in them, and you can sync those two devices, and then the computer sees them as one bigger interface. So you can expand later if you buy one of those. That's an option as well.
That's a great idea and super like future thinking, which I love. It's planning for the future. And if you're a band that's planning to do well and continue to record yourself, that makes a lot of sense to kind of invest in something that's going to help you in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And if you already happen to have, I have to add that as well, thinking about it right now, if you already have a digital mixing desk, which many bands or some bands do have these days, you can use those as well. They often have built-in interfaces, multi-channel interfaces, and you might have a decent like 8, 16 or whatever channel interface in your practice room if you have one of these desks. So that's an option as well.
Yeah, not only do you maybe have one, but it might even be a lot better suited than the smaller interfaces we mentioned because it'll have more outputs, more inputs, and sometimes there's even some great processing built in, which can be helpful as well. So don't rule that out at all.
Yeah, totally depends on your situation. I actually had a subscriber ask me this exact question. He was thinking about buying a digital desk or buying a small interface. And my answer was kind of, if you don't need the inputs and you're a bedroom producer on your own, recording one instrument after the other, maybe you don't record real drums or whatever, I would still probably go with the small interface because A, it's cheaper, and usually those have a little better converters and preamps and stuff because many of the digital desks have a lot of features for a pretty small price tag, and so there's always a compromise there. Right. But if you plan on recording a lot of channels, or if you want to record your jam sessions and need a lot of inputs for that, or if you want to do your monitoring, if you like rehearse with in-ears or whatever, and you use a digital desk like that anyway, then absolutely, you don't have to buy an additional interface. Go with the digital desks. It depends on your situation. So, yeah. Okay, then we have the headphones. Absolutely. I think that's absolutely number 2 or number 3 because we have the DAW. Already, right. We talked already about the DAW, the software.
By the way, any software will work.
Yeah, that's all we need to say about that. Just look it up. There are a couple of free ones. You can start with GarageBand if you have a Mac computer, Apple computer. There is a software called Traction, which is free and great. I had people I know use it and show it to me, and it's pretty impressive what it can do. Then there is Reaper, which is not free but cheap. But you can evaluate it for quite a while and can like try it out and see how it works. And if you decide to buy it, it's not expensive at all. Yeah, you are a Pro Tools guy, I think.
Right? I am a Pro Tools guy, and I love it.
Yeah, that's more a professional solution. But there's also a free version of that. There's what is it called?
I think it's called Pro Tools First. But honestly, it's pretty terrible. I would recommend any other free one before it.
Okay.
And I get asked about it a lot from bands I work with, and I actually don't suggest Pro Tools to them unless they want to kind of pursue a professional studio career. I really don't think it's very intuitive for creating music as a band. It's not a great writing tool, for example. Like some things like Logic are fantastic for writing and demoing on the go, and I would totally recommend you find a more creative DAW to start with, unless you want to get into studio recording and perfect like perhaps other media recording like television and stuff like that.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. I'm using Cubase, which is also a great DAW that can do pretty much everything. There's several like different versions of that. You don't have to have the pro one. You can start with the artist or the essentials, I think it's called, versions, and then upgrade if you want. That's also a great one. Logic is great by Apple. There's Ableton, which is kind of a special thing because if you're doing like a lot of electronic stuff or a lot of MIDI stuff, Ableton might be worth considering because I'm not really used to it, but I know that the workflow for stuff like that is pretty sick and Ableton is pretty cool. But I think for band stuff with a lot of real instruments, I probably wouldn't recommend Ableton. But as you see, there are a lot of options, and it doesn't really matter actually. Like the most important thing to know here is that they don't sound different, or maybe they do, but not enough to like say one is better than the other. Like it's just a way to record signals, and then the workflow is different. The effects are different, but it's not. One is not better than the other. It's just a personal preference thing. And I would start with something free and then see what works for you.
Absolutely.
Then headphones, yes. Basic monitors, yes. I would have a basic pair of studio monitors. It doesn't have to be crazy expensive because it's a little different than listening on headphones. It's not the same, and it's worth checking stuff on speakers, on like decent speakers. Yeah, no real recommendation here. Like I would just look up reviews in the price range that you can afford, and then go with what many people use successfully, because that's usually not too bad of a choice. And yeah, there's that. I would go for full range monitors. I would not choose them too small, because even if you don't need, the larger the speaker, the better you can reproduce low end, and the less distortion you have in the low end, and the more headroom you have. So bigger is always better here, actually. And if you can afford, choose a decent pair of full range monitor speakers.
I agree. I think I would personally throw monitors in the not essential pile. As long as you have headphones. Like if just recording and getting the songs tracked is your goal, I don't think it's essential, but it'll be so nice. You'd love having them. I personally can't stand wearing headphones for more than an hour. Even that, like I keep them off as much as possible, kind of thing. I prefer having the monitors going. It's just more natural, and it's more fun when you've got the band in the room because everybody can hear it, right? So you'll love having monitors. Yeah, but don't let that hold you back from starting.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main reason, actually, why I recommended having some, because if you're in a room together with your band and you want to discuss what you just recorded, it's so much easier listening on some speakers than having everybody wear headphones. And the communication is just easier. It's more comfortable. But yeah, as Malcolm said, it's not essential, and there are great affordable ones out there that will do. So yeah, that's that. What's next on your list, Malcolm? What would you say is next?
Is going to be, and actually this was your idea, but like investing in the actual instruments and tools that you're using, be that drum skins, guitar strings, renting some decent cymbals for the drum tracking, stuff like that. That makes a huge difference. Possibly the biggest difference. Like if I want to say that stuff is the most important, but you can't record if you don't have the stuff we just talked about. So it had to come before it. But then this is definitely the close second.
Yeah, absolutely. I would rather save money on the actual recording gear than on the instruments and strings and drum skins and that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, because we did leave out a mic. We didn't mention getting a microphone yet. And obviously you are going to need a microphone. But the microphone comes after all this stuff.
Yes, yeah, really, absolutely. Spend whatever money is left and get a microphone, because like $100 SM57 can record pretty much anything decently, and rather go with a couple of cheap ones like that, but have a decent guitar, a decent bass, a decent drum set, and especially strings, drum skins. Yeah, this is just the most important thing before anything else.
Absolutely. Let's give some SM57 love here.
Yeah.
Kings of Leon, which was like the biggest band in the world for a little while there. Their vocal was an SM57 for like multiple albums. Just insanity. And then there's a band called the Milk Carton Kids. I don't know if you'd have heard of them, but they're unreal. Their whole album was SM57s.
Everything?
Yeah. They're just two guitars and two vocals, but like it sounds incredible. But it's because they're incredible and their instruments sound incredible, right? The microphone doesn't make you sound good; it just captures what's happening.
That would actually be a fun experiment to do, but I bet you could record an entire song with the full band and everything with just 57s. Like you could for sure. It's not the best thing for everything, perhaps, but you could even throw them like at a drum kit on. You could use them as overheads even and everything. Yep. Like I think you could get decent results with only 57s, and it will sound great if you know what you're doing. So
absolutely. I'm going to do that eventually.
Yeah, I already noticed that you love the 57. You already said that in the guitar episode, I think.
Yeah.
And many people do for
it.
a reason. Like it's great. All right. And then the actual instruments. That's really the first thing to start, and I wouldn't save there. Maybe if you have a decent instrument, not the best one, not the best guitar in the world, or not the best drum kit in the world, but then just spend money on and experiment a bit with finding the perfect strings for your genre, for your playing style, finding the right drum heads, stuff like that. Like you can really like upgrade an instrument with that. Like even a pretty cheap drum kit can sound pretty nice with great drum skins that are tuned well. Yeah, definitely do that. Spend money there first, experiment a bit, find your tone there, your sound, and that would be absolutely top priority.
Totally. And if like drums, for example, it can be tricky to get the budget, stuff like that, or cymbals. Bands come in with that cymbals sometimes, and that's like a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know about in Europe actually, but in Canada you can rent like amazing gear for super cheap at like a music store, and that's a great way to go about it. Even with guitars and stuff.
Yes.
If you just don't have a good guitar for what you're trying to do, just rent one. It'll probably come with fresh strings. You might have to give it a little setup. There's really affordable ways to get good gear for when you need it.
Yeah, I always tell bands that not only music stores, there are like backline rental companies that touring bands use all the time, for example, and you can get any like amp you want or drums or whatever. You can rent almost anything, and it's not that expensive. Yeah, consider that. That's also a great use of your budget if you just need it for the production. Yeah, absolutely. Then you mentioned the cymbals. That is also something I would say within the drum kit. If like that would be probably the first thing that I would upgrade if I wouldn't have a decent drum kit, because as I said, cheap shells with great tuning, great heads on them, they will sound probably pretty good. Mm-hmm. And you can do a lot of them, a lot with those later in the mix as well. But if the cymbals are really crappy, that's a huge pain. And I have that often with DIY recordings, that the cymbals are a big problem, partly to the room situation often, but also to because of the cymbals themselves. So having a decent set of cymbals is huge. That was actually the first thing that I bought for my studio when I was still recording a lot. Just a decent set of cymbals to give to bands that come in with shitty cymbals. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, it's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah, go
I
on.
wanted to mention that it might seem like we're kind of whipping through this stuff if you're listening in, but fear not. Benny has a guide on what is your guide called?
It's the Essential Gear Guide. If you go to the selfrecordingband.com/gear guide, then you can download that. And it's...
Yeah. So if we're not covering something as thoroughly as you want, just go grab that, read it. You'll find what you're looking for. Or I'm sure you can just post right in the Facebook group and we'll be able to help you out too.
I will, yeah. I will post it in the Facebook group and I will post it in the show notes to this episode. And download that. It's like recommendations, gear recommendations, and it's we will see. Download it and just go through the list and see what you don't already own, and see a couple of recommendations there and choose what fits your situation. And also, we're going through this pretty fast, I think, through the gear stuff, because it's worth knowing what's important, but it's not so much what exactly you buy. That's why I don't give like clear recommendations here. Or it's hard to give clear recommendations because there's not only one thing that works great. Like equipment nowadays is in general so good that there's a whole lot of options, and you just need to know which categories of things you actually need. So
absolutely. Just to quickly touch on two more. If you're doing the drums, you obviously need to get some drum mics. And again, I wouldn't spend much time on that. Just find like a good, decent set with some good reviews that people recommend. Call it done. You can always upgrade stuff later. And then the last thing was, if you're not recording drums, that means that you're programming your drums, and you'll need a virtual instrument to accomplish that. And some DAWs do include some virtual instruments. So like essentially a virtual instrument is just an instrument inside your computer, inside of your DAW, where you can program whatever drum beat you want to happen, or whatever keyboard, anything like that. And some DAWs do come with stuff like that. Some do not. So you might need to purchase one depending on which DAW you choose. You might want to even take that into account when you're choosing a DAW. I know Logic comes with a ton of great virtual instrument stuff, for example.
Yes, absolutely.
Pro Tools does not.
No, Pro Tools does not. And Logic even has this virtual drummer thing, which is like an AI kind of thing. I haven't used it much, but I know it's there, which like there's a virtual drummer that plays to your riff or whatever you play with your guitar, and it works pretty well, actually, I think. And
it does. It's surprising.
Yeah. So there are better or worse DAWs if you go for a virtual drum kit. And if your DAW does not have one, it's still a good idea to get one. There are even free ones out there. You just have to Google a bit and you find some. Because when you're writing, we do that all the time with our band. I mean, we have a decent drummer and I can obviously record drums, but still, when we are writing, it's so cool to just like record an idea, program some drums to it, send it around within the band. Everybody can like instantly knows what the vision is, and it's a great tool for pre-production. Yeah, it's just I think it's good to know how that works and to have a virtual drum kit. So yeah,
absolutely, and it's a huge budget saver if you can't do the live drum thing. And I mean, we're going to do a whole top episode on making that decision. So we'll leave that for now. But
exactly,
but you should probably have one on hand. I think it's totally wise.
Absolutely. And while we're at the virtual instruments topic, I would also recommend getting a decent amp sim, like an amp simulation, guitar amplifier simulation. Those are plugins. So those are like virtual guitar amps that you can install on your computer and then use within your DAW, within your recording software. So if you don't know what plugins are, like equalizers, compressors, stuff like that, reverbs, and those are usually plugins. And those are little pieces of software that integrate with the actual recording software, and you can pick and choose and put those on your individual channels. And you can buy additional plugins that you can install, and they are ready to use in your DAW then. So you can always keep growing and expanding your library of effects and plugins is what they called. And there are guitar amplifier plugins that you can buy separately, or there are great free ones out there like Ignite Amps is one that comes to mind. I recommend that. I have already recommended that in the Facebook group actually, and I will do again because it's awesome. I use it a lot, and it's free. It's a great guitar amp, a virtual guitar amp, and it also has, and there is also like Ignite Amps is the company. The amplifier itself is called Emissary, and there is an IR loader as well, which is, without being too technical here, which is kind of it's a plugin that emulates the guitar cabinet, the speakers, which is necessary because the amp alone will not sound like a guitar amp in the room. So you need the amp and you need the guitar amp, the guitar cab. And those two are free. They work great. So especially for heavy stuff. And there are others out there, but just having such a thing is also great because then you can just plug your guitar into your interface and wear headphones at home, and you can like riff away, and it's like it sounds great, and it's a great writing tool, and it's also actually good for recording because if you don't have, if you cannot record a loud amp wherever you are, or it actually. Sometimes it might be worth just recording the DI, dialing in a decent tone with the plugin, and then sending like a version of the DI and a version of the rendered plugin sound to your mix engineer, and like he or she can always reamp your DI or whatever. He or she has the plugin sound as a reference, or can use it if it sounds great. But that's actually all you need to record decent guitar signals. So for starters, I would totally have one of those. Yeah, I would have an amp sim, and the exciting part is actually, and that's, some people don't want to hear that, but it's really the case. These days, those amp sims sound sometimes just as good as the real amps, or sometimes it's not a question of which one sounds better, but it's just different tools for different scenarios. So sometimes an actual amp might be better, sometimes the sim might be better, but yeah, this is a hot topic, but I think that we've arrived at a point where those software amps just sound really great. We can leave it like that. They sound really good. Yeah,
totally. And that was just a very broad look at gear as a whole kind of thing. Like we were saying, what is the best use of your budget when you're going into making an album? And we both agreed gear is something you have to check off.
Yeah.
But we were intentionally vague about what those pieces are because there isn't really a wrong answer.
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
So just, do some research, not too much research. Don't freaking let it hold you up, but just pull the trigger and get the essentials down. You can always swap it out, right? But I think we should probably move on to what the second most important use of your budget is.
Yeah, but we forgot one thing. You mentioned it, but we didn't talk about it. We forgot the mics. You said you need drum mics, but you also probably want to have one decent vocal mic, and like you need basic. We talked about the SM57s, and we talked about like get some sort of drum mics if you want to record drums. I would probably get one decent vocal mic as well, or one, like, let's call it all-round microphone. Like one condenser type microphone, or something like an SM7, or I don't know, just one decent mic that can do a lot of things. I just want to say that because yes, 57s are great, and you can, if you only have 57s, that will work. But I guess if the budget allows for that, there are, for a couple of €100 or dollars, there are decent condenser vocal microphones that you can use on acoustic guitars, or you can use on or a guitar amp, or on your vocals, on a lot of things, room mics, whatever. Just an all-round mic, something not too collared, or like you'll find those. You find the basic recommendations of mics that can do a lot of things. And if you go the small interface with one or two inputs route, I would get one of those, and you can basically do everything. Like if you get an SM7, or I sometimes recommend there's a Sennheiser one that I sometimes recommend. It's all in the gear guide. Download the gear guide. It's in there. But have one or two microphones for starters, unless you record drums. And
that is really wise. Just having a little bit of versatility. I don't know if that's a real word, but you'll know what I mean.
It's a word now.
Like I At my studio right now, I mean, I've got access to more, but I've only got 3 mics sitting here right now. I've got an SM7 B, I've got a 57, and I've got an AT4033A, which is a large diaphragm condenser. Yeah. So I'm like, I just pretty much, if it's a vocal, I go between my SM7 or my Audio Technica, and one of them always gets the job done.
Yes.
So you don't have to have a lot, but if you have, you'll be glad you have a couple options, I think.
Yes, exactly. Basically. One dynamic and one condenser, and you're actually good to go. You can choose whatever fits best.
Under $1,000, and my whole mic locker is sitting there.
Yeah,
it's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Then, what's the next thing on our list here? If you have the gear down,
for me,
for you, yeah,
it was education.
Education.
I think educating yourself on how to do a decent job recording is easily the next step. And that doesn't have to be a very big thing either. Like one solid course, like if you're listening to this, you're probably already on the self-recording band Facebook page and whatnot. If you're not, go do that. But that whole Benny's whole platform there would be a perfect like entry into recording to get the basics down and figure that out. There's unlimited stuff on YouTube as well. I might just suggest a course because it'll be a little more focused for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to weed through all the bull, but it's going to save you so much time and get you better results if you invest and focus on a course that is actually like built around what you're trying to do.
Another shameless plug here. If you go to the selfrecordingband.com/Academy waiting list, it's one word, Academy waiting list, you can sign up for the Academy waiting list, which is a list where if you do that, you get notified via email as soon as our Academy is out there. And the Academy, the Self-Recording Band Academy, is an online course that's affordable, that's specifically made for musicians. Like, it's not too technical. It's not there to. It's called Academy, but it's not an academic, like very technical, complicated engineering sort of thing. But it's a complete, like, proven system that teaches you how to make exciting records on your own in your practice room. And so, if you want to have a system like that, a step-by-step system that you can follow, just go there, sign up for the waiting list. You get more info on that, and once it's out, you'll be the first to know. So that's that. And aside from my own course, I absolutely agree with the education thing. There are a lot of great resources out there, and it doesn't hurt to read a book or take an online course or something affordable, because even if it's not like the best thing you've ever read, some are better than others, but it's almost always worth reading, hearing about different perspectives, learning, educating yourself, and like that will get you very, very far. And it's probably the biggest, like the business term would be return on investment here, because if you spend like $20 or euros on a book and it helps you make your recordings much, much better, then it's probably better than spending 500 euros on a microphone that improves your results just a tiny little bit. So education is a big one, and I would always consider either investing some time or money into education, or both. Yeah,
absolutely. If you're listening to this podcast, you're already on a good start. So
exactly.
Nice work.
Exactly. And then I will go to the next one, because this kind of ties in with the education thing here. If you are going the small interface route here and you can record guitars and vocals yourself, but you want to record real drums, but you don't have like enough inputs, enough microphones, or a decent room, you can consider, and you should actually consider, going to a nice studio or some local studio that can record drums, that has like a decent room and somebody who knows what they're doing. And not only will that get you a decent drum recording that you can take home with you and record your guitars, bass, and vocals and whatever to it, but it will also be a great learning experience. You will probably, like, watching someone do that and like really paying attention, like this is like invaluable, and you will get much more than the actual recordings and for your money here. You're not only paying for the studio time, but you're paying for the education actually. If you watch carefully and the person knows what they're doing, it can be an amazing experience. And that's actually worth considering, because if you think about it, if it's just for one record, if you buy a bigger interface with many inputs, if you buy decent mics, if you treat your room, there's a lot of things you need to consider when you want to record drums, and it can get a little expensive pretty quickly. And yeah, you'd have to run the numbers, but it could just cost as much as hiring an engineer and renting out a studio for a couple of days. So that might be the better option, actually. It will probably get you better results if you're just starting out. You will have the learning experience, and it's probably worth thinking about it. So what do you think on that, Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you go back and listen to, I think, episode 2, which is you interviewing me about my past in getting into this industry, I talk about doing exactly that. We hired a producer named Eric Ratz to make an album with us, and I just shadowed the guy the entire time and learned so much. It transformed my abilities and my just approach to recording. So I couldn't recommend it highly enough. I also did the intern thing, right? So I was shadowing a producer for years and working kind of in their systems and stuff. And yeah, so I'm a huge pro hands-on experience guy.
Absolutely. Awesome. And I think, we're talking to self-recording bands here, but if you plan on doing everything yourself in the future, it's still a great idea because, as we said, the learning experience. Like, yes, if you buy gear, you can use it more often and not just for that one record, but it will take you a lot longer to figure everything out on your own. And I think nothing beats the hands-on experience. Like, even the best, I sell a course, and even the best course or the best book or whatever will probably be not as, I don't know, it's like nothing beats the the hands-on experience. Nothing beats being in the room with somebody who's great at what they do. And so I would always do that if I have the chance to.
And you can always approach, if you're sticking with the drum example, you can always approach it when you're talking to that studio or the engineer you're wanting to hire for that about wanting to be hands-on involved. So they're kind of there assisting you. So you're then able to apply the stuff you've learned from Benny's course and do it with somebody that's able to kind of point out where you might be going wrong. Applying what you've learned with some guidance would be super great. And I think this isn't for everyone. Some people just learn better on their own and would rather make some mistakes and then try it again and just kind of rinse and repeat, right? So if that's you, we're just throwing out a bunch of knowledge and ideas, and you got to kind of separate it and figure out what works for you and what applies to what you're trying to do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's no right or wrong most of the time, but some things have just proven to be valuable, and one of those things is watching people do this. Yeah. Okay, so the next, what is left here? We have the gear basics, we have education, we have, maybe considering hiring a studio and do the drum recording at a studio. Then I would say basic room treatment is also it belongs also to the basics, to where people should start. And I'm not talking about buying expensive pre-made whatever panels and stuff like that. You have to be very careful with that. There are great ones out there, but some of them are just really, really expensive and they don't really do much. And you also have to know what to do with them and where to place them exactly. But just research the basics of room acoustics or the most common issues and do simple things that improve your situation a lot, like having some sort of absorptive material above your drums if you record drums, for example. If your ceiling is not that high, that's a huge thing. It will make the cymbals much clearer. It will it's like treating early reflections, meaning the walls around whatever you're recording with, even if you just put a mattress there or something, it's better than nothing. Stuff like that. Just research a bit on those things. Look for the right spot to place your instruments in the room, and then treat that corner of the room a little bit. That can get you really far. And there's another great resource that I'd like to point you to, and that is a friend of mine called his name is Jesko Lohan, and he's a mix engineer originally, and he's from Berlin. He's got a platinum record, and he's more in the electronic music world as a mixer, but he's a real like acoustic genius. He has a website called Acoustic Insider, and I will put the link in the show notes. And he's got a great website. There are a lot of blog articles, videos, stuff like that there. He's got an email list. If you sign up for the email list, you get a lot of great content for free there. He does one-on-one consulting, coaching. You can even plan your whole like acoustic treatment for you if you want him to do that. It's just a really great resource, and he has a lot of like DIY tips as well that are not too expensive and like that keep you from saving money, from spending money unnecessarily. And shout out to Jesko. Check out his website. Link in the show notes.
He is a genius. You nailed it. I devoured a bunch of stuff on his website when I built my own mix room here, and it made such a huge difference. So obviously not the self-recording, the average self-recording band probably isn't going to hire an acoustician to design their studio, but you should still go read a lot of stuff on there because he'll tell you how to get the best results for the least amount of money.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So just a thing worth thinking about, the room acoustics stuff. Depends on your situation. Some rooms are better than others, but it's worth thinking about. And before you spend every single dollar you have on stuff that might not matter as much, consider treating your room at least a little bit and use stuff you already have, if at all possible. And that's that.
The next one, and what I think is the most important, not the most necessary, like I mean the basics of gear, and we've kind of gone in order of most necessary, but what I think is actually going to be the most important and impactful on your album is investing in mixing and mastering at a professional level. I think we've mentioned before that this is a much harder to master skill set than actually engineering and recording your music. And not only is it harder to master, it costs more money to get the gear you need to do a good job in this market as well. So we've been kind of urging bands that want to make their own album to focus on engineering and producing themselves rather than mixing or mastering themselves. And I mean, we're the most biased people in the world because that's literally what both of us do for a living, but it's so true. And I think anybody in this field would agree. I don't know, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress that enough. And I know, I mean, yeah, I'm a mixer, so obviously I want people to hire me to mix their records. But that's not the reason I'm telling you that. I'm telling you because it's really the truth, and because I've experienced it on my own. As I already said in my story, I thought I could mix my records when I was starting out. I really thought, and I could, and I didn't believe people who told me that I could not. And looking back now, those records, they just didn't sound as good. And I should have totally hired mixers and just practiced on my own until I'm good enough. So I know that it's just true. And you will probably, like, if your record is really important to you, and it probably is, and if you want to get the best possible result, you don't want to regret certain decisions later. You want to listen to that record like in 5 years and still think it's a great record. And if you try to mix on your own without much experience, chances are you might regret that decision because it's just not possible without the experience. It's just not it. I'm not saying it's not possible to learn it at home on your own. You can. There are great resources out there. I've learned it on my own. Just took a while. It took pretty long, actually. It's just a matter of experience. And if you're starting out, and if you are a musician right now, and you don't want to be a professional audio engineer or professional mixer, if you just want to record your own releases, then absolutely, mixing and mastering is like a must investment if you want to have a competitive record. It's not possible I cannot imagine that anything else would be possible. And all the people talk about, everybody's talking about like Billie Eilish now, who won a lot of Grammys on their the record that they did on their own in their bedroom. But that also went through the hands of a really, really great mixing engineer. And so it's not possible without it. I mean, maybe prove me wrong if it is, but it's very unlikely. So consider hiring a mixing and mastering engineer.
Yeah, I was going to mention Billie Eilish as well. Like it's the most indie album ever, but it was mixed professionally by a professional, and I would love to hear the demos before, like the rough mixes before it got mixed, and just compare those. That would be so cool. Wonder if those are out there. I'll have to look.
yeah, maybe they are. And you can still, if you love mixing, if you enjoy the process, I mean, I fell in love with it. You can still do it. You can do it on the side. You can practice with your own material. You can compare it to the mixes that you get from the mixer you hired. So you can see, hear for yourself. You can start maybe with a test mix. If you don't believe me or us, you can just have somebody mix one of your songs and try to mix it yourself and then compare. If you like your results better, more power to you. Do it.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd say that's the best way to learn is mix yourself, have somebody else mix it, a professional, and then remix your song once you've heard the like what's possible from the professional mixer. Like you probably won't manage to beat it for years and years, but if you really want to learn how to mix, that'd be a great way to go about it. Still let yourself mix, but don't let it hold back your band, because if you're trying to produce your own band's music here, the goal is to have a successful band, and you need a professional product to make that happen.
Exactly. And also, if you decide on investing in mixing and mastering, which you should, consider really be careful with choosing the right mixing engineer, and not maybe don't go on Fiverr and pay like $20 for a mix or something, because like just do it properly, And also, yes, I know that really good mixing costs quite a lot of money, but it's so worth it. And maybe even worse than like doing it yourself and being disappointed with the result is paying money and still being disappointed with the results, because that can happen. Even if you pay like $100 a song or whatever, like there are great and not so great people out there, and it's kind of risky. So maybe do a test mix first if you want to go with somebody cheaper, or absolutely listen to their portfolio. Maybe get recommendations from bands that have worked with people. Listen to what the bands you like, where they how their records sound and where they had them mixed, but choose the right people, because it will always cost money, and it's worth spending a little more and then not be disappointed with the result. So yeah, that's also a big one, because sometimes I see bands they want to save $50 a song or whatever, and then it's just, I don't know, it's not worth it. So.
Yeah, I would add to that is choose somebody you trust, because you're putting a lot of trust in them when you're handing over like your heart and soul in the song to them to mix, and you need somebody that's going to get on your level, and because maybe they missed the vision on the first round, but if it's you don't know this person and they're not willing to like budge on what they've done, and now you're stuck with this thing that's not even close to what you were trying to achieve. That's a problem. So listen to the portfolio and make sure that you trust them as a professional and as a business, and then you should be happy by the end of your mix.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing more to add.
Yes.
And try it out for yourself. That's all. And then the last one on my list, at least here, is that's something that's also overlooked a lot. And I always tell that to people who are contacting me about mixing or recording or producing or whatever. And it's always kind of weird, because I'm essentially telling people to not spend all their budget with me, but I'm telling them to leave a little bit of a buffer there, a little bit to save a little bit of the money, because what you will also need, and that's essential, is a marketing budget. And that sounds, I know that not everybody likes that term or likes to think about marketing and business and stuff like that. But the reason why I'm saying this, or why we are saying this, is you want people to hear your record, right? Like all the effort, all the money and time spent and everything, it's only worth it, most of the time at least, if somebody actually hears the record. Unless you're doing it completely for yourself or your family or whatever, which is totally fine too. You can do that. Not telling you what your goal should be. But if your goal is to reach an audience, to get heard, and to get your record out there in the world and have as many people as possible listen to it, you should make sure that actually happens. So consider the budget for a record as a whole. Not only the production, but the whole thing, like the instruments, the gear, the production process, your room, the marketing, the time you spend for all of this, like everything that goes into making a record and releasing it to the world. If you do it on your own, is like you need a budget for all of that. And Yeah, that's just super important because like it's only music when it comes out of the speakers and somebody listens to it, right? Because otherwise it's just a file on your computer. So make sure that actually happens as many times as possible. And there are many ways you can do that. You don't have to pay for ads or whatever, but usually there's money or time involved, or both, and you should consider that and talk about what a good marketing strategy would be for your band. It can be authentic. It doesn't have to be this weird kind of marketing that nobody wants to do or talk about. It can be very authentic, and it's just marketing is just a term for letting people know that your music exists and getting them hyped on it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, what's the point if you're not going to get it out there? And I think any plan is better than no plan in this department. Set aside some time to think about it, and then possibly some finances as well to accomplish those goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not only the distribution and manufacturing, by the way, because that's also part where you obviously have to spend money if you want to do a physical release. But that's obvious that like you have to pay and then you get the copies of your CDs or vinyl or whatever. But after that, the actual getting the word out, that part, that also, there's money involved oftentimes, and there's many different strategies. And it's a pretty good idea to think of a strategy here and to invest some money into it and do it strategically. And honestly, I would rather have, and I told this to Malcolm before we recorded this episode, I would sometimes rather have a band pay me a little less if that's the only way we could make sure there's a little marketing budget. Because, yeah, I want people to hear the stuff that I'm working on, and you want to probably. So make sure that happens and that it's part of your overall budget.
Yeah, totally. I would love if we could find like kind of a music marketing guru to have on the podcast at some point to kind of dive into this topic more, because obviously it's not really our strong suit. We're more about the making music sound good, less than about making people hear it. But but we know it's important. We both play in bands, and it's essential.
Yes, absolutely. And guess what? We are doing a podcast right now, and yes, we love to share our experience, and it's fun talking about stuff, but it's also marketing for us. Like, we do that stuff as well for our studios, and also, you know, like I think we can be open about this, and you probably know that there's a lot of work and money involved in making a podcast. It costs money, it costs time. It's fun, and it's cool to do, and it helps you, and that's great. But it's also part of getting the word out, and bands do that as well all the time. I mean, you do interviews, you make music videos, you maybe pay for ads or whatever. That's what all your favorite bands do. That everybody tries to create content, to be out there, to be heard, and you should be no exception here. Absolutely not.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm fully on board with this. Marketing can't be ignored, has to be included. So let's just do like a quick bullet point recap. Yeah. There was the basics of gear. There was some education into getting yourself equipped with the tools and knowledge to actually record yourselves and have a good result. There was a little quick stop on room treatment, which is going to really go hand in hand with making your stuff sound good and making it so you can actually tell if your stuff sounds good. Mixing and mastering, kind of outsourcing and getting some professional help in that department whenever possible. And then last but not least, marketing and advertising your music out to the world and your fans, building an audience.
Sure.
That wraps it up, right?
Absolutely. That wrapped it up. I think we should post kind of this bullet point list in the show notes, and maybe just do like a mini blog post or something just for people to look that up, because then they can just follow and have kind of a checklist or whatever. Yeah. So I will come up with something like that by the time this episode is out. There will be something in the show notes for you to check out. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions on this, if you are still stuck with anything, if you're starting and still don't know what would be the best use for your money right now, what you should buy or do next, shoot us an email. Write us at podcast@theselfrecordingband.com. And we're happy to answer your question there. And also, I'm talking about the show notes all the time. The show notes to this episode are always the Self-Recording Band / number of the episode. So in this case, it's going to be the selfrecordingband.com /6. And You'll find all the links there. You'll find the link to the gear guide. You'll find the bullet points that Malcolm mentioned, and you can look all that stuff up. That's it. Yeah. And speaking of, and that's the last thing that I want to point you to here. We have a lot of recommendations and resources in this episode, but this is great because then you have actually something to do and to look up. One thing that I would want to recommend is also check out stonemastering.com, because that's Malcolm's site where he masters other people's mixes. So if you are actually thinking about hiring mixing and mastering engineers, check out Malcolm's mastering service. And mastering is also a thing like where it's not that expensive, but it's absolutely worth doing it. And so check that out. And I'm sure you will also be happy to answer questions on mastering specifically, because I think that's also something that people are not too sure about. Like it's the kind of a dark art that people don't know what it really is and if they really need it.
Yeah.
And we are telling them that they need it. So if they have questions, I'm sure they can hit you with those.
Yeah. Please reach out. I also do offer like a free test master. So if you want to see what that actually results in with one of your songs, send it over. I'll be happy to do that for you. And we got one last request for you, and then we'll let you go. Please head to your podcast service of choice and subscribe, and most importantly, leave us a review. It does a lot to help the growth of this podcast, and we also are just genuinely interested in what you think of the podcast. So we'd love if you left a review. So please head over to the iTunes podcast app or whatever you use and do that for us. It's super appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's it. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye.
Adios.